Hello, and welcome back to this episode of this Healthy Life podcast. Super excited for my guest today. I have Miss Lizzy, and she is here to share her wisdom on how we can help heal our thyroid. So she has a really awesome protocol and product called HypoHero. I'm not trying to make it longer than it needs to be. HypoHero, and it's a protocol that helps with your metabolism, energy, focus, all the things that come with having a thyroid condition. So super excited for you to join today. I've used the product myself. I really love it. So excited for you to share some of your wisdom, some of the background, and why this protocol is so important for our listeners. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. I'd love for you to start with a kind of brief intro, just sharing a little bit about yourself and how you got on this journey of, working with thyroid issues and creating the protocol that you have and kind of what led you here.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, it really started 20 years ago when I was 34 years old. And I had my son, I had been pregnant. And after pregnancy, I found that I had more fatigue. I couldn't lose the baby weight. I was just exhausted all the time. And I had brain fog and all of those classic symptoms. And I kept having that frustration where I'd go to the doctor and I'd say, something just doesn't seem right. I don't have the energy to take my son to the playground or clean my house or cook a meal. And the doctors would do the same thing over and over. They'd say, well, your lab work is fine. So you just need to eat less, exercise more, and maybe see a therapist and take antidepressants. And so I kept having these discouraging experiences going from doctor to doctor. And it was almost like medical gaslighting, where it made me question my sanity, because I would look around at other moms my age, and I'd think, how do they have the energy to do all these things with their kids? They're going to the playground, they're doing crafts, they're having birthday parties, they're doing all these fun things. And I can't get off the sofa. I just want to sit, and like sit on the sofa all day. I don't have the energy to wash my hair or walk up a flight of stairs, just simple everyday tasks. And so out of that journey, I kept going to these different doctors, and I even went to endocrinologists, which are thyroid specialists. And I hear this a lot in my community, where people say like, oh, should I just go see an endocrinologist? They're a thyroid specialist. And the frustrating part is that I had the worst experience with endocrinologists. They were the fastest ones to say it's not your thyroid, and you're just looking for. Actually, I did have one endocrinologist woman say to me, you don't have a thyroid problem. You're just here looking for a quick fix weight loss pill, and I'm not going to treat you. And
Wow.
I left her office crying. I was devastated that she didn't believe me. She wasn't willing to work with me. And I felt hopeless. And I thought, if this is what 34 years old feels like, I feel like I'm 60 and I'm in my early 30s. What is the next 30 or 40 years going to look like? And so I was really discouraged and hopeless. And so I reached this rock bottom point where I realized I'm going to have to learn how to advocate for myself, and this is going back to 2004, 2005. So keep in mind, the internet was still very new back then. There wasn't social media, there weren't user groups, it was really just like forums and message boards. And so I started digging around trying to find information on what's going on in my body? What are all these symptoms? Because they're telling me it's not my thyroid, but I know something's wrong. So how do I find an answer to this problem? And so eventually, I found old books, and I found some obscure Yahoo groups at the time, which later became Stop the Thyroid Madness. And I started digging around, and I started piecing together the story, and realized, wait a minute, there is a name for this. It's hypothyroidism. And so that really is what started the journey of, how do I, what is it? What are the symptoms? And then what are the options to get better? And then that was, another 10, 15-year journey of trying different things and trying to figure out what's the right combination, because getting the diagnosis is just the first step in the journey. A lot of people think like, well, if I can just get the diagnosis, all my problems are answered, but that is just not the case. it is so complicated, and something that we see so often in our community, our HypoHero thyroid community, is that we have people who are they've been taking thyroid medication for sometimes 20 or 30 years, and they're not getting better. They're gaining weight, they're losing their hair, they're cold, they're tired, they have no libido. They try to exercise and they gain weight, and so they're hopeless, and the medical system isn't helping them. And
Hmm.
so that's the long answer to
Yeah.
how did this Lizzy start, and how did the HypoHero Thyroid Protocol
Yeah.
evolve? Because there's so many people like me. I mean, I think the statistic is that roughly as many as 1 in 8 women will experience a thyroid condition in her lifetime, and there's somewhere around 25 million people taking thyroid medication in this country. And those are just the people who are fortunate, quote unquote, fortunate enough to actually get diagnosed. Because the other big problem is the testing. So, it's such a widespread problem in this industry. And it's shocking that in 2025, that thyroid care is so antiquated,
Hmm.
in my opinion.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to break that down a little bit. So, like when you mentioned you went to all these different doctors and, they told you, oh, your labs are fine, everything looks fine. Like thyroid testing is just such a like bad mix of testing, right? Because like so many doctors are just looking at your TSH, which really doesn't tell you anything about your thyroid. They're not really looking at your actual thyroid values and numbers to see what might be going on. And I can't tell you, like, even in my own coaching practice, like how many people come to me and are just like, oh, my thyroid's fine. It's been checked. I'm like, well, let's take a look. Let's see what labs they actually did to see if your thyroid really is fine or if you need to kind of, go down that path a little bit and see. So I'd love for you to share a little bit. You mentioned like when you even went to the endos, they were the worst ones. So were they relying just on TSH and they were just like, you're fine, get out of my office kind of thing?
exactly.
Or what
That's
was
right.
testing, like any other testing that they did for you?
That was it. They just relied on TSH. That's
Mm-hmm.
all they look at, and based on, if your TSH is in range, they say you're fine, and that's it, and they send you on your way. But as you know, and you just articulated, that TSH it's a measure of pituitary function. It's not a measure of thyroid function. There is no true measure of cellular level thyroid function. So there are a lot of pieces of the puzzle that help us understand what's happening in the thyroid, but TSH on its own is just a snapshot. So, and there's so many factors, like if you had a bad night of sleep, if you have inflammation, so all the people with Hashimoto's, if you have inflammation, that can affect your TSH levels. There are other things like biotin. Biotin supplements can affect your TSH levels. And of course, in our protocol, iodine is a critical mineral in our protocol, and that can increase TSH levels. But it doesn't mean that you're becoming hypothyroid. And so that's why there's so many people who are afraid of iodine, because they've been told, oh, well, it's going to make you hypothyroid. But that's because it's based on TSH changing. But what they're ignoring is the fact that TSH that's the same mechanism that moves iodine around your body. So of course your TSH will rise when you take an iodine supplement like our product iodine, because you're now moving iodine around your body, which is what your body needs to be doing in order to utilize iodine. But of course, you could end up with TSH rising. So if your doctor is only looking at that one piece of your diagnostic toolkit, they could be missing so much information. And so yeah, those are the challenges. And so that's why our protocol is so much more than supplements. Now, of course, like, it's my belief that supplements are foundational, because that's Mother Nature's fuel. It's what Mother Nature created for our bodies. And if we had a phenomenal mineral rich food supply, we'd be getting those minerals, but we don't. We have a very depleted food supply. Our soil has been over farmed. And so, of course, we're not getting those nutrients. Plus, if you live in the Midwest, in the goiter belt of the United States, you're certainly not getting iodine, and generationally haven't been getting iodine. But aside from that, the soil affects how much nutrients we get, and so we're not getting those nutrients. So that's why I believe foundationally getting the minerals, that's the first piece. But the protocol is so much more than just minerals. It's helping people to learn what their body's telling them,
Mm-hmm.
and specifically learning how to listen to symptoms and body temperature. And that's
Mm-hmm.
that's really the big piece. And if you've followed my work,
Mm-hmm.
you've probably heard me talk about body temperature.
Yeah.
And in fact, this is my my thermometer. I have them all over my desk. I carry
Hmm.
them with me. If I could make a handbag just for thermometers, I would, because this when thyroid lab testing failed me, tracking my temperature is what saved me.
Hmm.
It was the one piece. And I'm curious, Erica, do you track your body temperature? Is that
I do with
something?
my Aura ring, so but I
Oh,
haven't been
okay.
really good about taking it. But yeah, I'd love that was actually one of my next questions. So I love that you're kind of segueing into this. Is like, low body temperature is just such a common thing that happens with thyroid conditions. Like I remember I always used to be cold. Like everyone would be like hot and I'm like bundled up and so cold. My temperature has just always been lower than normal, right?
Lower than normal,
Yeah.
yeah. And are you one of those people where, if you have a fever, your temperature like barely cracks 98.6,
Yeah, or like
and
99.
99, right? And your doctor and your family, they're like, "Oh, you're
You're
not sick.
fine.
You're fine. You're just faking
Yeah.
it."
I'm pretty
Right.
consistently like always come in around like 97, like in the 97. So I know I like even still have like low body temperature that I'm always trying to kind of get up.
Yeah, so that's a classic thing, and what's so shocking, and I hear this all the time, is that there's so many people walking around with low body temperature that industry-wide, the medical community says, "Well, that's the new normal. Body temperatures are dropping," instead of acknowledging the
So
fact that
there's an
actually
issue.
our thyroid function is dropping.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
it's a systemic issue. And so, like, there's a fascinating study that talks about how for every degree below normal, so let me back up and say normal being 98.4 to 98.6 in the afternoon, morning temperature 97.8 to 98.2 as the low end. And these are numbers based on Dr. Broda Barnes, who was a pioneer thyroid expert going back 150 years, and other experts like Dr. James L. Wilson and Dennis L. Wilson, not related, but both experts in thyroid and adrenal health. And so when we're talking about thyroid temperature, those are the ranges: 97.8 on the low end in the morning, 98.6 in the afternoon. For every degree below normal, below those ranges, our metabolism can slow by more than 7%. So
Mm.
that means if
That's
you're
huge.
degree
7%
and a
is
half,
huge.
huge, huge, right?
Over like
So
a degree of temperature, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so, yeah, so if you're 2 degrees below normal, 96.8 or 96.6, which is something we see all the time, that's more than 15% impaired metabolic rate. And so we have all of these women, especially walking around in this country, trying diets, trying GLP-1s, nothing wrong with that, but they're not getting results, and they're discouraged and frustrated, and they think, oh well, it's genetics, oh well, I don't have willpower, or oh, I have cravings I can't control, and we blame ourselves and we think, well, there's something wrong with me, like I must not be worthy. And I think that it deeply affects our self-esteem and our self-worth, and we feel so discouraged. And that temperature piece is critical, because you cannot out diet a temperature problem. It's just impossible. And even like something that we see so often is that in our community, people will, they'll try different diets. And the frustrating part is that the diet might work for a little while and then it stops working
Mm-hmm.
and then it never works again. Have you had
Mm-hmm.
that experience?
Yeah, definitely. Like it's like you're like do really well on a diet and then all of a sudden you just kind of plateau with it and you're like, okay, well, I'm doing the same thing that used to work. Like why is it not working
Exactly.
this time? Yeah. Well, yeah, what's up with that?
Exactly, exactly. Classic hypothyroid profile is somebody with that exact situation, and that again, it's the temperature is a measurement of how your thyroid is functioning. So when your thyroid is underactive, your metabolism slows down and it down regulates. At first the body's like, oh wait, oh, you started paleo or keto, or whatever it is, the FODMAP, and everything's going great, and then the thyroid goes, oh wait a minute, oh, I got you, like you can't outsmart me, and then it down regulates, and that's why that diet stops working and it never works again. And so eventually we run out of diet options
Hmm.
because there
There's
are
only
only
so
so
much out there,
many.
right?
Yeah. So that's why, like, what I found is that as I restored my thyroid health, restored my adrenal health, improved my body temperature, and got it into a normal range, then I was able to lose weight. And then I could kind of eat in a normal way, like, yeah, if I have an ice cream, I'm not going to gain 10 pounds, and I don't have to do anything extreme in order to be able to maintain my weight. And so that's why educating people about this piece of body temperature is just so important for, I think, for thyroid patients to have a measurement that is not a scale, that isn't like making them feel bad about themselves, and also isn't relying entirely on these lab testing diagnostics and doctors' interpretations of those diagnostics. So it's kind of this combination of like having the tracker, which is a tool that I share in the HypoHero Thyroid Protocol. And it's really a tool that I created for myself when I was trying to figure out this complexity. And so that's why I share it with everyone who follows the protocol. Because if you take the tracker and you look at your lab work, then you can have a meaningful conversation with your doctor. So it's about empowering people to understand their body and not rely, like, have this idea that like the doctor is going to know everything.
Right. And they're
There's
going to be able to save you and tell you
yeah, they're going to
exactly
be able
what
to
to do
save
and you'll
you.
be fine. Yeah, it does unfortunately doesn't work that way. They're not these mystical creatures that we think
Yes,
they are when we're young.
exactly. Yes. And I've had some really amazing doctors over the years, just phenomenal. And what I found is that it's not because they had some, like you said, some, mystical degree where they learned something on a mountaintop that nobody else learned. It's because they were open-minded and they listened. And that was it. If you can find a doctor who's open-minded and listens and willing to work with you, then if you show up with the right tools and the knowledge and you understand your body, then you can advocate for yourself. So that's why I teach all of that in the protocol. Sometimes it's tough because people come in and they say like, oh, well, I just want to take your supplements and I don't want to do the work, and
You're
I
like,
think,
it
well,
doesn't work that way.
like, it doesn't work that way. I wish there was a quick fix pill,
Yeah,
that like could solve
absolutely.
everything and you didn't have to put in any work. But that just everyone knows that doesn't exist,
Hmm.
So
So if people are struggling with low body temperature, which pretty much if you have a thyroid issue, chances are 99.9% you're struggling with low body temperature. What are some
yes.
steps that people can do to try to kind of heal that part of it and, get their metabolism working again and hopefully, start healing their thyroid along with other measures as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, obviously, the HypoHero Thyroid Protocol, that's what we do. We help people to restore their thyroid health using minerals. A big part of that process is detoxing halogens, which are bromide, chlorine, and fluoride. And these are halogens that are everywhere in our environment. It's impossible to avoid them. If you use toothpaste, if you drink, city water, if you swim in a pool or go in a hot tub, you use dishwashing detergent, if you have flame retardant on anything in your house where you eat commercially baked bread, you are exposed to these halogens every single day, and they block thyroid function basically. And even for people who don't have a thyroid, because I know some people will be like, oh, well, I don't have a thyroid, so I don't have to worry about halogens. That's not true. So the thing is, we have trillions of cell receptors in our body, and they all have a little port for iodine, which is how thyroid hormone is transported in our body. So we have two parts to this process of thyroid function. It's making thyroid hormone and converting thyroid hormone. And so these trillions of cell receptors help with that process of making and converting thyroid hormone. So even if you don't have a thyroid, you still have these same issues throughout your body of the thyroid hormone receptors. Now, when we are exposed to these halogens, the receptors basically become clogged up with these halogens because they're all in the same family of iodine, and so the body sees these halogens and they say like, oh my gosh, I need fuel for my cell receptors. Grab that thing that looks like iodine and try to use it for fuel. But that's like putting diesel in a regular octane engine. It doesn't work, and it just gums everything up and blocks the hormones. And so that's why part of our process is detoxing and then restoring minerals and then helping people to optimize their thyroid, whether they're on thyroid medication or they're not on thyroid medication, because we get people at all different stages of their journey. And so being able to help guide people through those different steps is part of the objective, because we want people to get better. That's the ultimate goal. We want people to get better and live their lives and really feel good in their body.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So let's break down the protocol a little bit. I know there's kind of like three different, parts to it. If you can break down kind of what each part is and what each part does and how they work together.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So restore, detoxing, and optimizing. So restoring is the first part where you're using our first product, Thyroid Convert, and then Halo Detox. So Thyroid Convert is it's a custom blend of selenium that's bioavailable. So it's fast absorption, reduced risk of selenium toxicity, which of course is a really big issue for selenium. We don't want to have toxicity from selenium. We want to be able to utilize it, and that piece of Thyroid Convert, it sets the foundation for using iodine. And so iodine gets a bad reputation because especially with the Hashimoto's
Mm-hmm.
people. And actually, I should have asked you, Erica, do you have
I do have
Hashimoto's?
Hashimoto's, yeah.
You have
And yeah,
Hashimoto's.
the
Okay.
iodine, it's like such a debate. It's like some doctors are like, no, you need it. You don't have any iodine, but just make sure you don't overdo it. And other doctors are like, don't touch it. Like it's so toxic if you have Hashimoto's. But, it's
Yes.
like finding that balance. So I've gone through phases where I've like taken it and don't take it. And, like when I don't take it, I'm always low. When I take it, it's like, oh, you're taking too much. So it's like this kind of fine line and I never know where to
Yeah.
land. And so I just kind of pulse it here and there as needed.
And so that there's so much misinformation about iodine. It is the most feared and vilified mineral of any like mineral or supplement that I know of, is most feared and vilified, and yet the most important. And I often say if I was on a deserted island and I could bring one thing with me, it would be thiodine, which is our iodine supplement. It is the most important mineral that we need for every part of our health. And so for people with Hashimoto's, the biggest problem is that and this is why doctors are afraid of it. They don't know how to use it. And so iodine, it makes thyroid hormone, and then when the body has that T4, it has to convert the T4. That process creates inflammation in the thyroid. So if you have Hashis, the big issue is inflammation. You're trying to manage the inflammation so that your thyroid doesn't have an autoimmune flare up, because that then causes the body to attack the thyroid gland, and then that's what causes the inflammation. So iodine is helping your thyroid naturally make thyroid hormone. So you need that. You have to have that. What's missing that people don't understand is that you just need a little fire, a little like flame extinguisher to put out the fire of the inflammation. So if you have that, that's how people with Hashimoto's can effectively use iodine without having that autoimmune flare up. And so that's really the key. And that's why Thyroid Convert is the first supplement in the protocol. And that's why we restore that level, because a lot of people, and especially with Hashimoto's, they tend to be low in their selenium levels. And so they need to
Mm-hmm.
restore that so that they can then handle the fire, of
Mm-hmm. The
iodine.
iodine.
Exactly,
Mm-hmm.
without having that reaction. So Thyroid Convert is the first part, and then Halo Detox is the next step in the protocol, which is it's a salt powder drink, and it helps in two ways. It helps to restore adrenal function, because so many of us who have these undermanaged, undiagnosed, conditions. A lot of us have adrenal issues, and so restoring the adrenals, helping to support them, is a big piece of helping to prepare for the next stage of adding iodine. But it's also an important piece for that the halogen detox component that I mentioned, where when we get to the point of adding thiodine, we have to have enough minerals in our body and enough water to flush out those halogens. Because as soon as iodine comes in, it's going to start to flush out those cell receptors that I was talking about. And those halogens, if you they need to bond with something. They have to bond with another halogen, which would be chloride in the salt, and that bonds to the halogens, and the water helps to flush them out. If you don't have that piece, then you probably know this. Where do
Mm-hmm.
toxins go?
Get
Toxins
stored all over your body in
all
your
over your
fat.
body, exactly, in the fat, exactly, exactly. So Halo Detox sets the foundation so that when you add thiodine, you can have the best results without having some kind of autoimmune flare up, without having a detox reaction, and then at that point, when you do add thiodine and start to increase it, you have, ideally you have better results and you start to feel really good. And any detoxing, it is part potentially part of the protocol, but if you follow the steps, you should have minimal detox reaction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if
So
someone does the protocol, like when do they start to notice a shift in like how they feel? Like obviously as long as they're kind of following the protocol correctly, like is it within like the first couple of weeks of using it, or does it take time to kind of start to feel like your energy coming back or metabolism turning back on?
yeah, that's a great question. It really depends on the person and their diagnosis. So for people who have Hashimoto's, what we find is that they start to notice improvements pretty quickly as soon as they add thyroid convert, because their body is then able to handle the inflammation better. And even with Hashimoto's, what we find is that there's so many people who are being given thyroid medication for Hashimoto's and they're not getting better. And it makes sense because Hashimoto's, if your inflammation is managed, your body shouldn't even need thyroid hormone medication, because the reason why Hashimoto's is so difficult for people is because it destroys your thyroid over time. But if you can stop the inflammation and the thyroid doesn't get damaged, then your thyroid can function in a healthy way, and it shouldn't even need that thyroid hormone. But what happens is doctors then, they try to bypass the thyroid and they say, well, we'll just give you thyroid medication, we'll suppress thyroid function, and then we'll replace it with thyroid hormone. But that doesn't work. It's like having this tug of war between what your body's trying to do and the thyroid medication is trying to override. And so what we find is that the people with Hashimoto's, they tend to notice improvements very quickly on thyroid convert just because they're managing the inflammation. And going back to your original question, it really depends on the person. Somebody who is undiagnosed and they've never taken thyroid medication, they may notice improvements when they get to the point of adding thiodine, which could be, depending on the person. People with Hashimoto's start thiodine a little bit later because we want to give them more time to let their body really prep and prime with thyroid convert. So they start thiodine in week 8. People who are undiagnosed or diagnosed as hypo, they start thiodine in week 3. So undiagnosed people, they may start to notice improvements by week 3 when they start to add thiodine. And then the diagnosed hypo people, they typically notice improvements when they add thiodine. The people who have any adrenal issues will typically notice improvements when they add Halo Detox, and
Is
they'll
it
be
the
like, "Oh
salt?
my gosh, yes, the
Yeah.
salt. Yes, that's right."
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, so is the protocol something that you should just kind of be on all the time? Like, you should, like, once you kind of go through the halo detox, do you kind of bring that back in like once a year just to make sure you're detoxing halogens? Or is it kind of like you do it once and until you need it again? Or
Yeah.
what's kind of the optimal way to use the protocol?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are two ways that we use Halo Detox. First is we use it every day because what's I'm sorry, my dogs are barking. What's great about Halo Detox is that your taste buds will actually be your guide for how much to use, because your taste buds tell you how much sodium your body needs. And so, that's why so many people in this community have cravings for salty snacks in the
I
afternoon.
love
Are you
salt.
one of
I'm like such a
oh,
salt fiend.
oh yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I'm
saltine.
like,
Yeah, so like, popcorn, pizza, butter, bagels, all chips, all that stuff. And especially, between 3 and 5 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, are those times that you have those cravings at those times of day, like afternoon or evening for you, or any
I
time of
just like
day?
salt all the time.
All the time. Yeah, exactly. Right. So like with Halo Detox, your taste buds will tell you. So what we suggest is drink half your body weight in ounces of water every day, add Halo Detox and adjust for the taste. And typically, people will use anywhere from like 1 to 2 scoops and 40 ounces of water, somewhere in that range, and they might drink that 2, 3, 4 times a day. But what's great is that when you get the salt that you need through a liquid with no calories, you're going to save yourself a ton of calories, because if your body is needing salt, like you're saying, like being, having those cravings, it's really hard to resist it because that's actually your body trying to keep you awake. Like when we crave salt and sugar and caffeine, it's just our body being out of fuel. And so being able to drink Calo Detox helps to keep your energy up at times of the day where you might normally be lagging. So that's the one way that we use Halo Detox. And then the other way is specifically for a detox reaction. So that might look like, somebody's they're at the point in the program where they're adding thiodine. They start at 2 drops. They're feeling great. The next week they go to 4 drops a day. They're feeling great. The next week they go to 6 drops. And then all of a sudden they're starting to feel a little bit of fatigue. They might notice that their temperatures are dropping a little bit. They're feeling a little bit more stressed, maybe a little more brain fog, and kind of unexpected setbacks in their tracker. And that might be a time where we might think, oh, okay, that might be a detox reaction. And that's why this protocol is structured in this way, because sometimes, like, if people get to that point and they think, oh, I'm having fatigue, I must be reacting to iodine. That's not the problem. It's not the iodine. The iodine is actually doing its job, and you just have to work through the detox part of it. So that process can be a couple of days where essentially you're just using more Halo Detox and more water over a period of 1 to 3 days to just
Mm-hmm.
try and flush
Kind of
out
get through it.
the
Yeah.
detox pathways. Yeah. So
And then what about body temperature? When on the protocol do people start to see that kind of start to normalize? And is there something that you need to do to maintain that as well?
So using all the supplements is how people maintain it. Everybody's a little different in in when they start to see temperature patterns improving. So, like, for people who are taking thyroid medication, what we see so often is that people have a T4 conversion issue because they're mineral deficient, or they have Hashimoto's and they have inflammation. So their body is taking the T4 in either the levothyroxine or Armour thyroid. So Armour thyroid is mostly T4. Levothyroxine, Synthroid, tyrosine are all T4. And if a person has a conversion issue, their body is not optimally converting it to T3. And T3 is the hormone that you need for energy, weight loss, focus, all the good stuff that we think of with thyroid hormone. So if your body's not converting, it's just building up like this big pool in your body in the form of reverse T3. So reverse T3 is the opposite of T3. It does the opposite. It's like the brake in your car. It slows you down. And that's again going back to the testing, why the thyroid testing is so unfortunately flawed, because a lot of doctors don't even acknowledge reverse T3. And we see this in our community where people say, like, my doctor refuses to even test reverse T3, but they're on a high dose of thyroid medication, and they're getting worse. They're gaining weight. We saw one person who, the doctor put them on this huge dose of thyroid medication, like, I think it was like 300 milligrams of Armour thyroid one time
Wow.
a day. I know, unbelievable. And her body was breaking
Yeah.
down. Because she wasn't converting it. And so what we find is that as people start to they restore the selenium with ThyroConvert, they start to support their adrenals with Halo Detox, then they start to convert, so that thyroid medication may start to be converting properly. And then that's why we offer some tips and strategies for how to work with your doctor to adjust thyroid medication, because as you use a protocol, you may find that you don't need as much thyroid hormone as you once did. And so, that's a hard piece to navigate if you don't know what to look for. And that's why in the tracker, over time, you'll see, like, tracking temperature 4 times a day, tracking about 10 symptoms that are the common hypothyroid symptoms. We start to see these really cool patterns emerge. And
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing I love more than looking at people's trackers. It's so much fun because it's like a roadmap to what's going on in their health.
Yeah.
And of course, not a doctor. I can't give medical advice. I can only share, how I interpreted the tracker, if it was my own tracker, or based on how I built the tracker, like what I would interpret it as. But there's just these amazing patterns that we see, like, people who have adrenal issues, their afternoon temperature often drops quite dramatically. And if you're not tracking that measurement, you might not even realize that, you're taking a nap every day at 3 o'clock because your temperature dropped 2 degrees.
Yeah. So what are the optimal times to be tracking your temperature? So you mentioned first thing in the morning, and then is around like 3 or 4 p.m. the next time that you should check it, or what's kind of the temperature
Yeah.
taking protocol that you should be using?
Yeah. So what in our tracker, what we suggest is 4 times a day. So first thing in the morning when you wake up, because that's the basal metabolic rate, lowest temperature, lowest resting metabolic temperature of the day. 4 hours later, which is, so if you wake up at 8, the next reading would be around noontime. Another 4 hours later would be around 4 o'clock, and then 4 hours later around 8 o'clock. So roughly around that time schedule, starting from the time you wake up. And so that temperature, that'll give you some really good clues. Like another common temperature pattern we see is somebody will have low temperature all day, and then at night their temperature will go up.
Hmm.
And then they have insomnia. They can't fall asleep at night. They're
Because they're
wide
actually
awake.
awake.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that can happen when a person has, they have hypothyroidism and high cortisol at night. So this helps them to like start to figure out like what are their hormonal patterns between their thyroid and their cortisol levels.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, so we have time for one more question.
Oh,
So
okay, yeah.
you've,
Unpack.
obviously have seen a lot of people improve with your protocol and, using this process, using the tracker. So is there like one key kind of success story that sticks out to you of someone that had amazing success with the protocol and with the app that you can share?
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, there are so many.
I'm
I
sure.
mean, yeah, I wish I could share all of them. I mean, we have so many hypo heroes, I mean, really this journey is about all of you guys, everyone who has hypothyroidism. And I'm thinking of this one woman, Tammy, who she started our protocol a few months ago, and she said that she's lost 20 pounds in just, a matter of a few months. Now, again, results vary by person, so that's unique to her. But being able to get back and exercise again and take care of her family, just live her life. Like that's the kind of story we see every single day. We have more than 22,000 people in our protocol, and we just have lots of success stories like Tammy. So,
Awesome. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. If people want to find you online and order the protocol, what's the best way to find you?
misslizzyhealth.com
Awesome.
or, Facebook, Miss Lizzy Health, the HypoHero Thyroid Protocol.
Awesome. We'll link to everything in the show notes as well.
Okay, great.
Amazing. Thank you
So
so
much.
much.
Appreciate
Of
it.
course. Thank you.